Hey, take a look at this shirt. It's got a spooky skull on it, and it was designed by a person and not a prompt. And it comes from Into the AM, fine purveyors of graphic tees and elevated menswear with whom I have a partnership. So when you shop at Into the AM using the link in the description, or if you use code Grouchy when you check out, you'll not only save 10% off your order, you'll help support this channel, and you'll support a company that's still using real artists. Now let's get into it. The Grouchy Nerd. Alright, you antisocial weirdos, it's time to learn a game that plays at the ideal player count. 1. Final Girl, designed by Evan Derrick and AJ Porfirio and published by Van Ryder Games, who have successfully weaponized completionism, is a dice-rolling hand management survival game which sees you as the hopeful survivor of a killer's rampage. The game is played over a series of rounds, and your goal in Final Girl is to defeat the killer, even if it kills you. To do so, you'll play cards which allow you to move around the map, saving victims and finding items that will help you defeat or at least distract the killer. The term Final Girl was first coined by Carol J. Clover back in 1987 to describe a trope in horror books and films of the final survivor of the story, often female and often chaste to some extent. The final girl usually survives the story, but often with some significant trauma. Examples include Sidney Prescott from Scream, Nancy Thompson from A Nightmare on Elm Street, and even Sarah Connor from The Terminator. To play, you'll need the core box and any one feature film, which is what they call the expansions. Each feature film contains 2 final girls, a killer, and a location, which are all fully modular. You can play any final girl against any killer in any location. And some of the feature films are based on real film franchises, with, let's call them copyright-friendly versions of the characters. So if you want to play as a modern-day Little Red Riding Hood against the big bad wolf in the storybook woods, you can do that. Or if you want to see if not quite Ellen Ripley can stop definitely not Pinhead from terrorizing the next street down from Elm, well, you can do that too. And if you've ever played Hostage Negotiator, also by Van Ryder Games, some of these rules are going to feel pretty similar because they're based on the same system. That's right. The most evil dice in all of board gaming are back. What, you thought you were safe? You're not safe. None of us are safe. No, sorry, we are quite safe. They're just dice. Right? First, you'll need to choose your killer, location, and final girl. Each location and killer comes with a component list, which may also have additional rules just for that location or that killer. And when those special rules contradict any of the base game rules that we're going to go over in this video, the special rules take precedence. Remove the boards from the box and take out both component trays. Yeah, the box is the board, and it's all done with magnets. It's pretty awesome. Our killer is Hans the Butcher. We're at Camp Happy Trails and we're playing as Lori. And in this case, neither Camp Happy Trails nor Hans has additional rules. It's just pure, unfiltered Final Girl. From the core box, you'll need the player board, which has 2 sides to determine difficulty: normal and extreme horror. And after briefly filming it for this video, I don't think I'm ever going to even look at that side again. This is already a very difficult game. I don't know why you would, you know what, not the time. It's not the time. Place your chosen Final Girl's card below the player board with the side showing meeple outlines face up. Very gently, very carefully, and with a great deal of respect, place the 6 horror dice nearby. Maybe don't make eye contact. They might see it as a challenge. You'll also need all of the action cards. Action cards have a name, possible effects, which I'll explain later, and a cost measured in time in the bottom right-hand corner. Take the 0 cost cards as your starting hand, then separate the remaining action cards by name and arrange them by cost to create your action tableau. Set all of the meeples nearby, as well as the victim holding boards and their matching tokens. Place the killer board above the player board, then place the location board to the right of the killer board. Find the killer's finale cards and their dark power cards, which will look like the top and bottom half of the killer. For your first game, it's recommended to find and set aside the epic dark power card. You don't need that kind of heat for your first game. Then shuffle each group separately and choose 1 card from each. Without looking at them, place them face down on their indicated spaces on the killer board. The remaining cards can be set aside, but you should still not look at the other side of them. Both the killer and the location have terror cards. Combine them into 1 deck and shuffle it. Then draw 10 of these cards and place them face down to the right of the location board. Shuffle the item cards and deal 3 piles of 4 cards each and place them above the location board in the indicated areas. Then flip the top card of each pile face up. Shuffle the location setup cards and draw one. Each setup card has a unique name which provides some flavor and tells you kinda what's going on at the beginning of your little horror movie. The Final Girl icon shows your starting location. Place the purple meeple in the indicated space on the map. Place one of the red meeples in the space marked with the killer icon. Then in the remaining spaces, place as many yellow victim meeples as the number on the space on the card. So a 2 here means I put 2 yellow meeples here. The white, blue, and orange meeples should not be used here and can stay set aside. Shuffle the 9 black final health tokens with the side showing a +1 die face up. Without looking at the other sides, place one in the circle at the bottom of the killer board and one at the top of the player board. Then place the rest back in the core box, making sure to never see the other side of any of them. The rest of your and the killer's health is represented by these health markers. Hans the Butcher starts with 12 health, so you'll need 11 markers because the token is the 12th. Same goes for you. Lori has 5 health, so you need 4 wooden markers. Some card effects with this icon will allow you to recover health, but your health can never exceed this starting number. The Bloodlust token goes at the bottom of the killer's Bloodlust track. We'll go over this and how much it sucks for you later. And the Time token goes on the 6 space of the time track. The killer board shows a starting horror level. Place the other red meeple on the horror track at the indicated level. And last, shuffle the location's event cards and flip one face up, then follow the instructions on that card, which may add additional meeples, or introduce a special character represented by one of the other colored meeples, or it may even introduce an ongoing effect. If ever there are too many meeples to fit comfortably in a space, you can place them on one of the meeple holding boards, then place the matching token in the space. The meeples on the board are considered to be at that location. And that's the basic setup, but again, you'll have to check those rules inserts for any special setup instructions for the killer or the location that you chose. Like the Evamorph, who has 3 stages of growth, or the Sunny Days Mall location, which has an NPC you need to protect. The dumbest NPC of all time. He just runs straight toward danger every chance he gets. Also, before you get started, you should decide now how you want to handle rules ambiguity for things like settling ties, or if a killer's special rules interact in a weird way with a location's special rules. The book recommends using one of 3 options. The rule of infinite evil has you resolve these issues in the way that has the worst outcome for you. The rule of abject realism has you resolve them in the way that feels the most logical or thematic. Or the rule of never-ending hilarity, which has you resolve them in the way that's the funniest. Live your best Roger Corman dreams. You'll just have to provide your own nudity. Each turn plays thusly. In the action phase, you'll play and activate cards and items. In the planning phase, you'll acquire cards from the action tableau to use on the next turn. Then the killer takes its turn hunting and killing victims, or you, the final girl. Surviving victims may panic, causing chaos on the board and potentially putting themselves in even more danger. And in the upkeep phase, you'll have a chance to prepare for the next round. Like Michael Myers with the garden trowel, let's dig in. The action phase is the main gameplay phase. Most actions involve playing a card from your hand and resolving a horror roll, then performing one outcome of that action depending on the number of successes of that roll. To perform a horror roll, you'll roll the number of dice indicated by the current horror level. At level 4, we get to roll 2 dice. If you manage to lower the horror level to 1, you'll get to roll an additional die. However, if you let the horror level get above 6, you'll lose a die. But you'll always roll at least 1 die. Most action cards show 3 possible outcomes depending on the result of the roll: a double success, a single success, and a failure. The meanest dice in the whole wide world have 3 results, each on 2 faces. 1s and 2s are fails, 5s and 6s are successes, and 3s and 4s are partial successes. Partial successes count as fails, but for each partial success you roll, you may discard 2 cards from your hand to treat this result as a success. So if we played Walk as our first action, we'd first put the card in a central discard area, which is separate from the action tableau. Then we'd make a horror roll. The horror level is at 4, so we roll 2 dice, and we got a 3 and a 4. If we do nothing else, we failed and have to resolve either of these failure lines. Either move 1 space, lose 1 health, and lose 2 time. Thematically, maybe we tripped over a branch or something. Or don't move and just lose the 2 time. Thematically, we stood still. But since these are partial successes, we still have options. We can discard 2 cards from our hand to treat one of these dice as a success. At 1 success, a walk lets us move 1 space and lose 1 time. Or I could discard 4 cards, 2 for each partial success, and move 2 spaces and lose 1 time. And that is a pretty key concept of this game, and one you're going to have to try and find balance on. You're not going to be able to play every card in your hand. The dice just won't allow it, so you need to prioritize which are the most important actions while you still have cards in your hand that you can dump to turn those 3s and 4s into successes. And you need to be willing to discard cards that you really wanted to play to make sure that those important actions succeed. Some effects can grant bonus dice. If you would ever need to roll more than 6 dice, just note the result of however many more than 6 you need and re-roll them as new dice. Also note that you will only ever resolve 1 outcome 1 time. Even if you did roll all 6 dice and managed to get all 5s and 6s, the best you can do is the 2 successes result once. When moving with an action like walk or sprint, you can only move to an adjacent space, which are usually indicated by a path or door and connected by a white line. You don't have to move the full number of spaces you're allotted, but you don't get to bank movement. Any unused movement before you start your next action is lost. And don't worry about these numbers for now, those will come up in the panic phase. Double successes will allow you to move more spaces, but do note that even a double success will cost you time. Keep track of this loss of time on the time track. But don't worry, that refills every round. You're fine. You may move into and out of the killer's space with no restrictions or penalties. If you move out of a space which has victims, up to 2 of those victims may move with you. However, victims will never follow you into the killer's space. If at any point during the action phase you are on an exit space marked with a green outline and this exit symbol with victims, you may save those victims. Saved victims may be placed on your final girl card on any available victim saved space, gaining whatever reward is indicated by the icon you cover up, like gaining time, lowering the horror level, or even gaining a card from the action tableau. And saving victims does not interrupt movement. So even if you're just passing through an exit space, you can still save the victims that are with you on that space. And you do have to be with the victims on the exit spaces to save them. You don't just automatically save them if they're in an exit space by themselves. When you've filled every saved victim space on the card, you may remove the meeples and flip your card over, revealing and activating your final girl's ultimate ability and the reward for saving further victims. In Lori's case, her attacks will now deal an additional damage to an enemy if she's in the same space with it, and any more victims she saves will gain her 1 time each. Certain spaces around the board are search spaces with an orange outline and a wrench symbol. While in one of these spaces, you may play a search action card to search the space and take one of the items in the stack of cards matching the name of the space you're in. A double success here lets you take a look at the top 2 cards in the stack, choose one of them to gain, and place the other either on the top of the stack face up or on the bottom of the stack face down. If you choose to place the card face down in the stack, you do not get to reveal the new top card. A single success or the top fail option on a search lets you just take the top item card in the matching space. And again, you do not get to flip the new top card face up. And a failure on a search action will also cause the horror level to increase. Regardless of the outcome, be sure to mark the time you spent searching. Item cards can range from weapons to vehicles to distractions. Most items can be used at any time during the action phase, though some weapons may only be used during an attack action. But we'll talk more about weapons when we get to attacking. When you gain them, most items will go in your backpack and can be used during the action phase. There is no limit on how many items can be in your backpack. However, some items must be held in your hands to be used, indicated by 1 or 2 hand icons here. You can hold 2 one-handed items or 1 item which takes both hands. Any items with hand icons beyond your 2 hands must be held in your backpack and may not be used until you move them into your hands. When you pick up a new item, you may rearrange your hand and backpack items. Otherwise, you can only move an item into or out of your backpack during the upkeep phase. Some items are one-time use and will indicate that they must be discarded to be used. Others have a limited number of uses. Track uses with tracking markers. If an item with uses moves into or out of your backpack, keep the tracking markers on that item. When the last use marker is removed from an item, discard the item. Remember that when taking a rest action or anything else which allows you to recover health, you can never exceed your starting health. When playing an attack action like Weak Attack or Furious Strike, you must be in the same space space as the killer, unless you have an item or ability which says otherwise. You'll perform a horror roll as normal and deal 1 damage to the enemy for each of these damage icons, removing a health token from the killer board for each. Some items you can hold in your hands are weapons and will add their damage to one of these attacks. So you might have an axe, but you can't just use the axe. You have to play an attack action while holding the axe. Weapons have a range and damage modifier here. The axe doesn't add any range, so you still have to be in the same space as your enemy, where the old revolver has a range of 1. To attack with the revolver, you must be in an adjacent space to your enemy. So if you get a single success on a furious strike, you'll deal 1 damage to your enemy and lower the horror level by 1. Then anytime you must resolve this icon, the action phase is immediately over, even if you had more cards you could play. But if you were holding the axe during that attack, it would deal its additional damage, so that 1 damage becomes 3 damage. And if you're playing as Lori and her final girl ultimate ability has been revealed, you'll deal an additional point of damage for being in the same space as your enemy. Some weapons do not require an attack action, like the archery bow. These weapons will have some other activation trigger explained on the card. In this case, you can spend 2 time and remove 1 counter to deal 1 damage to an enemy 1 or 2 spaces away. Whenever you lose, spend, or gain time, make sure to move the time marker up or down the track the appropriate number of spaces. If the time marker were ever to move below the 0 space on the time track, the action phase is immediately over. However, you can, at any time before that, discard any number of cards from your hand to gain 1 time for each card you discarded. Which might not seem like much, but the book takes care to mention just how important this can be. Moving, for example, takes time even if you succeed, so you might want to discard a card or 2 you know you can't play this round, so that when you move into that new space you can still search or attack. And any time that you don't spend in the action phase becomes your currency to acquire new cards in the planning phase, as we'll see soon. Certain actions may raise or lower the horror level. Remember to keep track of this by moving the other red meeple up and down this track, and remember that if you can get your horror level to 1 or less, you'll get to roll an additional die when you resolve horror rolls. If you were to ever lower the horror level but the marker can't move any farther up the track, you'll gain 1 time. If the horror level would ever increase but the marker can't move any further on the track, you'll increase the killer's bloodlust, which we'll go over later, but it's not good. You don't want that to happen. The action phase can end in one of 4 ways: if you decide to stop, if you run out of action cards, if the time marker goes below the 0, or if you resolve any actions with this icon. When the action phase is over, you'll move on to the planning phase, where you can spend any remaining time on actions from the action tableau. Remember to keep all cards you played and discarded during the action phase in a separate pile for now. When taking a card from the tableau, you must pay that card's cost in time, moving the time marker down to keep track of how much you've spent. And you can always take any 0-cost cards for free as long as they're part of the action tableau, which will make sense in a second. However, you can never have more than 10 cards in your hand. When you finish purchasing cards, reset the time marker to 6. Then, and only then, place all action cards from your discard pile back into their respective spots on the tableau. The 0-cost cards can just share a pile. Did you catch that? So you can never repurchase any cards that you played or discarded in the action phase because they don't become part of the action tableau until the end of the planning phase. So it's also not necessarily a good idea to use all of your cards every round, otherwise you're not going to have very many options next round. When you're all done planning, it's the killer's turn. The killer phase has 2 steps. First, resolve the killer action. Then reveal and resolve the top terror card from the terror deck, which will make things worse in a variety of ways, and will often involve the killer taking another action. And I am going to do my best here to show you as little of the bad cards as I can, because discovering the flavor of this game is really part of its charm, and I don't want to take that away from you. Most killer actions will have 3 steps. Pick a target, move toward that target, then attack in their final space. Han's starting attack skips the move step. He just picks a target and attacks. The killer's target will be one of 3 options: the closest victim, the final girl, or whomever is closest. If there's a tie for the closest, the killer will go to whichever space has the most victims. Remember, the final girl is not a victim and should not be counted for this. And if there's still a tie at that point, remember to fall back on whatever rule you chose for managing ambiguity. Once the target is picked, the killer will often move toward that target. For each boot icon in the action, the killer will move toward its target along white pathways, the number of spaces indicated by the killer's current movement value, which is determined by their bloodlust level. For Hans, that starts at just 1, but as his bloodlust rises, this value may increase. And remember, it'll move that number of spaces for each boot on the action. For each attack icon present, the killer attacks a single target in its space, dealing damage equal to its damage value, again dictated by the bloodlust level. And the killer will attack in its space even if it didn't make it all the way to its original intended target. So if it's moving toward the final girl but ends movement in a space with a victim, it will attack the victim. Victims only have 1 hit point, so when the killer attacks a victim, it is automatically killed. Any damage left over from the killer's attack is lost. Remove the meeple from the board and put it on the dead space on the player board as a constant reminder of your failures. Then each time a victim dies, whether they were killed by the killer or some crazy accident, you must increase the killer's bloodlust level. Now, we already know that when the bloodlust rises, it might make the killer stronger or faster. It might also have another effect, shown in this first column. In the case of Hans, when his bloodlust hits these levels, you'll have to increase the horror level by 1. And when a killer's bloodlust reaches a certain level, they'll unlock their dark power. Flip their dark power card over, giving the killer some extra ability for the remainder of the game. But those are secret. We're not going to spoil just how much trouble you're in. If the killer's bloodlust were to increase, but it's already at the top of the track, you'll have to resolve whatever it says here. In Hans's case, he'll get to heal a point of damage and discard the next terror card. Which does sound like a good thing, but when those run out, he gets stronger. And this little arrow doesn't mean it resets, it just means it goes up and then it comes right back down. When the killer attacks the final girl, they'll deal their damage to you, removing health tokens for each point of damage you take. This attack automatically succeeds unless you play a blue reaction card. Note that Guard just blocks damage, while Retaliate both blocks and deals damage back, and the damage on Retaliate can be augmented by weapons. If a killer is going to attack in a space with both the final girl and a victim, the killer will attack the victim first, unless the target was specifically the final girl. Yes, it's probably to traumatize you, but it also means you can just fling campers at him while you try and get away. When the killer has fully resolved this action, you'll then draw the top card of the terror deck. And again, I don't really want to show you too much of what's in store for you here, but the terror cards will often increase the horror level or make the killer take another action or make you draw a new event card. Events with ongoing conditions do not replace each other, they're just both true now. And remember that if a victim dies as the result of a terror or event card, the killer's bloodlust is still going to rise. Some terror cards are minor dark powers. These are played to the spaces above the killer board and will increase the killer's health as well as give them an additional ongoing ability. When you damage the killer, this health is removed first. When all the health is gone from a minor dark power, the card is discarded and the killer loses that power. The panic phase probably won't happen every round. A victim will panic if it's in the same space as the killer and at least one victim was killed this round. And just like the bloodlust rising, it doesn't matter if the killer killed a victim, it just matters that a victim died that round. To resolve a panic, roll 1 die for each victim in the killer's space and move it to the indicated direction based on that result. So a 5 would move this victim here, and a 1 would move this one here. If the result is not listed, the victim will stay where they are. Which is how I panic, by shutting down. I've been described as not great in a crisis. The upkeep phase will also probably not come up every round, but it is still an important step. First, you'll check to see if there are any terror cards remaining in the terror deck. If there are, you'll just move on to the next step of the phase. But if there are no terror cards remaining, you've moved into the final act of the movie, and must reveal the finale card on the killer board. Some finale cards have immediate effects, which must be resolved, immediately, but all will replace the killer's initial action with something way worse. And once the finale has been revealed, you'll skip the second step of the killer phase as there are no terror cards left to draw. There may be other cards in play which have upkeep rules, so look around and resolve any of those rules now. And last, you'll have an opportunity to rearrange your backpack and change what items you're holding in your hands. When you're done, begin the action phase of the next round. Play cards and resolve horror rules, then buy new cards in the planning phase. The killer attacks attacks, victims might panic, and you'll upkeep if necessary. Anytime either you or the killer's final health token is their only remaining health token, you'll gain an adrenaline surge and get to roll an additional die during horror rolls. And if you and the killer are both down to your last health, you'll roll 2 additional dice. Play continues in this way until either the final girl or the killer loses their last health token. When either character's final health is lost, flip the final health token over. If it's blank, that character is well and truly dead and the game is over. However, if the reverse side of the token shows at least 1 health icon, that character comes back, either for one last scare or one final push to save the day. The phase immediately ends. Replace the black final health token with a white final health token and however many regular health tokens are needed. White final health tokens also grant an adrenaline surge if it's the last health, but when this health is lost, there's no coming back. And make sure you caught that bit about the phase immediately ending, so if you deliver the death blow to the killer but then he comes back, well, now you're probably stuck in his space with no way to run away. Uh-oh. If you manage to defeat the killer, you win, even if you die taking him out. However, you lose if at any time you run out of health and the killer is still alive. Some feature films use minions, like Bad Times at Buddyland, which I guess is based on that time I got stuck in the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese. I couldn't get the leverage to sit back up because I was just on the balls and no one could see me, so they kept stepping on me. It was genuinely terrifying, but I don't know how Van Ryder found out about it. No, Freddy's the guy with the glove. Minions will have their own reference cards, which tell you their health, move, and attack values. Attacking a minion works exactly the same as attacking the killer. In the killer phase, minion actions are noted with this M icon, and in the panic phase, victims will panic if they're in a space with a minion, just the same as they would if they were in a space with a killer. And that's how to play Final Girl. Now you should run. You should run. They're coming.
The Grouchy Nerd.
Hey, you want to see something really scary? Look up adult literacy rates in the US. Yeah, that's a nightmare.